So there have been a lot of protests as of recent. And yesterday in my community of Pasadena, California, there were protests specifically for Anthony McClain. And that's because he was shot by police about a week ago. And they released the footage is in quotes, that answers absolutely nothing. The police are saying he had a gun that he pointed at them. We don't even know that he for sure had a gun. We don't know if he had a gun. There's no evidence that says without a doubt this man had a gun. There's no evidence
or anything like that.
Huh?
So no body cameras on the police officers?
So the body cameras that they released, which was heavily edited and narrated, they claimed they're like, there's the gun, and they circled his left hand. Now he's running. He's running from them. His hands are up like this, and it's from a far distance. You can't tell if anything is in this man's hand. I mean, could there have been something potentially? You can't tell for sure. When he initially goes to run, there's something in his like pants that looks like it could be a gun. It also, other people are saying it was a gold belt buckle. Personally, I couldn't tell for sure what it was. I don't know what it was. But it happened so fast, and he's running. They immediately go to shoot the guy. That's their immediate reaction, go to shoot the guy. And then, of course, when they do, the cameras are off. One of the cops covered their camera. So it's very, 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 very suspect, to say the least. And we had to wait over a week for this footage. And after the footage was released, it answered zero questions. Zero questions.
Yeah,
so it was shady beyond comprehension. So yesterday they did a hearing where they were deciding whether or not they were going to have civilian oversight for police. And there was a protest. I want to share some of this. So here's part of the protest. So I know you can't hear it terribly well. I was just sort of, I was part of the protest. I was part of the march, and I was, just kind of showing it from my, from my phone. But what's interesting to me, this is what happened throughout the march. People throughout Old Town, people were out on patios eating, they have patios open and whatnot. People were stopping, and they were listening, and they were applauding. And some people even joined the march, which is sort of an uplifting moment. It gave you a little bit of hope as you're marching and you see your city applauding you and joining you. Now, I will say that it wasn't all good. Here's a video I'll share next. Now, an attorney friend of mine told me to make sure I point out the fact that Hi, I'm only up,
and in this video, I'm going to show you how anyone can quickly and easily create dual videos.
It just started an ad automatically. Here, hold up. So my buddy, who's an attorney, made me give a quick disclaimer here. A truck did weave in and out of the protesters, and with the way this guy was driving, I don't know what else he could have been doing other than trying to antagonize the protesters. The protesters were on the street marching. It was a peaceful march, a peaceful demonstration. And all of a sudden, this guy just swerves. He was about maybe a foot from me. He just swerves across the protesters. I don't know what he was doing, if not trying to antagonize the protesters. He swerved all the way to the right side. He did not make a right-hand turn. So it's not like, oh, maybe this guy had an emergency that he was trying to get to, and he made a kind of poor, reckless judgment call while driving. I don't know what else this guy was doing, if not trying to antagonize the protesters or worse. And the footage that I captured is not very high quality. The reason for that is because with one hand, I was filming, so I was a little shaky, because with the other hand, I was trying to shield a young girl who got separated from her family. There were a lot of families here, by the way. So there were a lot of children when this guy decided to do this. There was a young girl who was by herself. She was, very, very small. And I noticed she was just kind of close to the truck. So I had my other arm out to kind of shield her. And you hear me at one point in the video yell, "There's a little girl." The reason I yelled at is because, you know, she was a little kid and she was just kind of running around. She didn't necessarily, but she ran kind of close to the truck. The guy who heard me yell that just sort of scooped her up and then brought her back to, you know, the person she was with, her guardian or parent, or, you know, whoever it was she was with. But so here's that footage. Here is that footage. Again, I apologize for the quality of it, but I told you why. This man's little girl. So there you hear me yell, which, you know, without the proper context, hearing a weird looking dude like me yell "little girl," that's kind of creepy if the right context is not known. But here, so we don't really need the audio here because I basically just say, but this is what happened. This is the company. So it's a router company. It's a plumbing company. I looked them up. They're located right in Glendale. And this guy, so again, he just went across traffic. When I got in front of the thing, he started moving forward again. So he went across traffic. He did not make a right at any point. So this guy, we were marching there. He just went all across traffic, cutting off the protesters. So not everyone was a good apple, so to speak, throughout this protest, but most people were stopping. They were listening. They were applauding. And some people even joined the march. And here's what happened as a result of all that. Now, Pasadena City Council met yesterday, and they met for hours because there were hours and hours of public comments around this, demanding there be civilian oversight of police. And here's what happened. Pasadena unanimously passes new police oversight model. After 8 hours of impassioned, often bitter deliberation, the city council created an 11-member civilian commission and an independent police auditor, reshaping how the city oversees its police department. Is this enough? Probably not. Well, definitely not. It's not enough. But this is a step. And this is, you know, a small victory. Now, we got to still stay militant because we got to find out how this is going to be unrolled. If they just unroll this and allow a bunch of insiders to infiltrate, i.e. if the police are overseeing themselves, it's just going to be, as someone else put it, it just turns into a glorified complaint board and nothing else. But if it's unrolled properly and there is, you know, proper independent oversight, which they are saying there's an independent party involved here, it's a step in starting to fix this systemic disease. But again, I don't think it goes quite far enough. I think we're at the point you need to defund the police. You need to have heavy civilian oversight that's very extensive and the community is heavily involved. And I think you need to go a step further. We need to reimagine what exactly a police officer is. Because a police officer, as we know it, is a completely failed concept. It cannot continue the way it is. We need to just kind of reinvent what law enforcement in our life means.
Yeah, the police as we know it is a still relatively recent thing, right?
Sure.
Usually for the vast majority of history and mankind, they always did had community policing in some form, whether it be the government will sponsor that activity or whether the community will come together itself to establish those kind of protocols. And back in the day, back in early civilization, it was mostly the churches that would run those kind of things. But the concept will be this kind of similar now, where you have our community that will have their own form of policing. So when you say, if you want to say get rid of all policing, that is not what we are necessarily saying. We're saying that we need to turn the power back over to our communities because we have white police officers who not even from our neighborhoods that they'll come in our neighborhood, they'll terrorize us. They don't really care about like the actual results of their policing and what they're actually trying to accomplish. And now you see now with these protests, it shows there was a story that just came out how the police pretty much gave up policing the far right protesters. And these are the protesters that are the most violent. You can say whatever you want about the looting situation, but if you look at the people who are actually dying, these people are getting killed at far right protests. And the police are not tear gassing these people. They're not going after these people. And
well,
there
in
was
some
a clash.
cases, they refer to them as friendlies.
Yes.
And in New Mexico, they called them friendlies.
I wish I remember the exact location, but I saw a tweet not too long ago where there was a clash between Proud Boys, some far right protesters, and Black Lives Matter group. and the Proud Boy group were being loud, belligerent, but the police were literally just going after the Black Lives Matter protest. And there's also the fact that we already know that law enforcement as a whole were already infiltrated by far right white supremacist groups and
Oh,
militias.
KKK members, straight up KKK
Yes.
members. Yeah.
So
well, Ferguson, bringing it back to where you're based in Kansas City.
yes,
Ferguson
I know all about that.
showed us that. They showed us,
Yes.
oh, these KKK members are given badges and guns.
Yeah. So when you hear liberals, for example, talk about reforming the police, how do you reform a group that's been taken over by white supremacist groups?
I
Who are
love
you
the way
talking
you
about?
said, not to interrupt, but I love the way you just said liberals. You said it as if, like, it was like if the way somebody said a word could just be an eye roll. It was the way you just said liberals right there.
I used to
You're just
call
like,
myself
like
that. So
liberal, like you,
when I talk,
like it's almost like you got slightly tired just saying it. Liberals.
yes, because they drive me crazy because they will put Black Lives Matter blocks behind their speech. I'm talking about Elizabeth Warren, but they will continue to support massive military budgets. They'll continue to support the police state as we know it. They will continue to support ICE. They continue to support these forces of oppression that is used against our communities. And this is the conversation I have where a lot of white progressives get mad at me because I call them out. Well, I'm like, okay, so you want to support Biden, you want to support a cop and Kamala Harris because that's comfortable for you. What threat actually do they have on your life? Because I know people whose lives have been ruined by civil asset forfeiture and those kind of policies that the Democratic Party they still endorse to this day.
Well,
So give me your opposition party, and I'll be happy. I'll be
nah,
happy
no
to take
kidding.
on Trump.
No kidding.
So people always complain to me because I don't go after Trump. But I'm like, why would I go after them first when I've been ruled by Democrats? Kansas City is blue. Kansas City is pretty progressive. Cleaver is a Democrat. Like we had Democratic mayors. Like people say we should. The people that only. I guess you can focus on Republicans, especially if they hurt you in your lives. But if you're a progressive and you're on the left
they
and you only worry
do.
about that, if you
Right.
only worry about that, you're missing a part of the puzzle. That's my
exactly. You're absolutely right because I mean, and just to, I mean, I would say to clarify, Republicans are extremely dangerous. I mean, I think there's no doubt about that. But for people who are, looking at it from the point of view, the socialist point of view, the anti, basically it's a systemic disease point of view, which is the point of view I'm coming at it from, which is the point of view you're coming at it from. The horribleness of the Republicans is a given. We know that. What's more interesting, and maybe more interesting is not the right way to put it, what's more essential to understanding, I think, is that how did they get to be this way? How are the Republicans allowed to operate this way where they are, as Noam Chomsky would say, and I think he's absolutely right, one of the greatest threats to humankind? There is no other democratic experiment that has anything close to the Republican Party. The Republican Party in the United States makes the Tories in England look like Boy Scouts. And the Tories are not great. I mean, they're terrible. But how are the Republicans allowed to be this ridiculous? Well, they're allowed to be this ridiculous because the Overton window in the United States is so far to the right, they needed to buy a new camera to zoom out far enough. Because the Democrats are a right-wing party too. And because the system is bought and controlled by the same owners, the same ruling donor class. So when you have a system like that, the entire system is a problem. And the Republicans are just like at the head of that ugliness. But Republicans wouldn't be able to be this terrible if the Democrats weren't as ineffective and ridiculous as they are. Similarly, the Democrats wouldn't be able to be as ineffective and ridiculous as they are if the Republicans weren't so terrible. And that's bipartisanship, baby. That's how they exist. I did a short video on it where I was like, bipartisanship debunked in 2 minutes. And it's like, yeah, they need each other. And this is what they need. They say when they need each other. They say it takes a Republican wing and a Democrat wing for the American eagle to fly so it can shit on all of our heads.
Preach, brother. And I love how you brought up Noam Chomsky. I love how you brought that up because they love to bring up Chomsky when every 4 years when he says we must vote for the lesser two evils. Why don't they ever listen to Chomsky when he says his other things that they don't find necessarily comfortable? Like
Where
you
he
said
calls
earlier.
out the system.
Yes, and when he calls the Republican Party the most dangerous terrorist group in human history, I agree with him on that. So the people who think I don't go after Republicans enough, you gotta realize my criticism of the Democratic Party is they are like Republicans. So when you want to quote Chomsky when it comes to lesser two evil, which is a legitimate conversation to be had, but you treat Republicans like they're your friends. You had John Kasich, who's part of this evil group that we were talking about with Chomsky, right?
He's just politically, he's no different than Trump. He just talks nicer.
Yes,
he just talks nicer. I mean, it's such a facade.
So who's more anti-Republican? Me, a guy who would never in a million years invite John Kasich to speak at a convention I will be responsible for, or the people who want to buddy up with George Bush and John Kasich, the people who say "Welcome to the resistance," Dick Cheney, because this is the point I made earlier. Why are they able to buddy up with the Lincoln Project? Would they be able? Would the Lincoln Project be buddying up with us right now if Bernie Sanders was the nominee? There's no way that would happen, right?
No.
There's no way that would happen. They team up with Joe Biden not because they are the adults in the room and they are making a sacrifice of their beliefs and their morals. They're not for 1 second. The Lincoln Project and Joe Biden are closer to each other politically than I am with Joe Biden.
You know what's funny? I said
that.
have you ever used that to like refute a troll?
That's when you get blocked. That's when I was get blocked.
Kidding. Oh, I mean, if people want to block me, go ahead. I don't care. But like,
I'm saying that's when it happens.
One time, a Biden, one of those Biden stands was coming at me, and I was just saying how pretty much no matter what happens, like the American people, like we lost, and he goes, well, Biden's the nominee, so I guess I lost less. And I was also saying in that tweet, I was saying how like I think Trump's going to win again because I do. I don't think Trump's going anywhere unless something really changes significantly between now and November. I just objectively don't think Trump's going anywhere, especially if nothing's done about all the people that are going to get kicked out of their homes. I mean, that's just like, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how people spend so much time wagging their finger at people on the left or people on the all these different groups. Meanwhile, if 40 million people lose their homes in a month, which is on track to happen if nothing's done, it's just an objective truth that with that amount of voter suppression, when you have mail-in ballots that are going to be the big way to do things because of a pandemic, a GOP incumbent is just not going to lose. It's just not possible. It doesn't matter how I feel about Joe Biden. It doesn't matter how I feel about Donald Trump. It doesn't matter how you feel about it. It's just the way it's going to be. And nobody seems to be alarmed by this. Nobody, like I don't, all this time, and if you're one of Biden stands, all this time you spend wagging your finger at people on social media, you should wag your finger at elected officials to do something about this housing crisis. You should be doing that anyway because it's morally repulsive. 40 million people should not be losing their homes because they can't work because of the pandemic. Nobody should be losing their homes, period, because housing should be a freaking human right. And that's why I'm against private property. But that's a different discussion for a different day. We're not going to go that far deep into the rabbit hole. But anyway.
Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. Get your news on with Ron. Don't you want to know what's going on? We're getting our news on today. You can tweet me an article at Ron Placone. We'll go through it together and make